Hey everybody, what's going on here? John Tuohy here. This is a really fun day that kind of came together spontaneously, so this is going to be really great. We're doing a little bit of a roundtable discussion about all sorts of things related to guitar and music, which is something that I think we're all nerdy about, and if anybody's listening to this, you probably are too. And so I have some great guests with me today, and we're going to talk about a bunch of different things, and kind of this is going to be more of a conversation than it is an interview, and we're just going to kind of throw ideas back and forth, and so maybe I'll start by reading a mini bio here. Guitarist and producer Chris Schreiner has led his jazz fusion trio around the world, combined guitar playing and a passion for electronic music with DJ guitar solo project Dropkick Pop, and created viral memes and guitar lessons with his brand Guitarmalade. His adolescent years saw him studying with Jim Hall before attending Berklee College of Music, playing shows with drummer legend Kenwood Denard before graduating in 2005. Chris is currently promoting best-selling book, The Guitarmalade Cookbook, wrapping up the new video course, Guitarmalade's Bago Tricks, and doing pre-production on his next album. Thanks for hanging, Chris.
Pleasure to be here, John.
And we also have with us Julien Kasper. The international community of blues and jazz fans became aware of Julien through his work with pianist and Hammond B3 organist Bruce Katz on their extensive tours throughout the U.S. and Europe. He recorded 2 CDs with the Bruce Katz Band on Audio Quest, Mississippi Moan, and 3 Feet Off the Ground. Julien has also recorded with Mighty Sam McLean, Journey, and Soul Survivor on Telarc. Julien was born in France in 1962 to American parents and spent his youth as an army child, moving around the American South. Inspired by Bob Dylan and the Beatles, he took up guitar at the age of 8. In 1978, at 16, while living in Tallahassee, Florida, Julien began touring with the legendary blues rock band Crosscut Saw, featuring harmonica virtuoso and singer Pat Ramsey. After several years and one album recently reissued on A Karma, Julien decided to seek more challenging musical terrain. He moved to the fertile music town of Austin, Texas, where he gigged constantly, honing his skill among the city's heavy-hitting players for 4 years. Julien is now based in Boston, Massachusetts, where, in addition to writing, performing, and recording his original music, he is a professor on the guitar faculty at Berklee College of Music and an avid all-season surfer. How is that, Julien?
That
was okay?
Fine.
Oh, it's amazing hearing that. And then a quick one for me. Guitarist John Tuohy, based in Fairfield County, Connecticut, has performed with many groups across multiple styles and genres over the past 20 years. Winner of the Best Band in Connecticut at the New England Music Awards, the progressive rock band Mile Marker Zero has been his main group for over 15 years. They've toured the U.S. as headliners in addition to opening up for many great acts, including Porcupine Tree and Spock's Beard. Mile Marker Zero was featured in the video game NASCAR Heat 4, as well as releasing 4 albums, The Haunted, Mile Marker Zero, Young Rust, and The Fifth Row. Most recently, he teamed up with MMZ's bassist for a side project called Zero Sync, where the duo wrote and performed on its most recent album, 4.8. And that's good enough for me right there.
Excellent.
All right, all. Okay, enough preamble. It's great to have you guys here, and thank you for spending the time.
Of course.
Okay.
So I feel like a good way to I'll facilitate here, but feel free to take this on anywhere you want to go. I want to start with what being a guitarist in 2024 is like. And I was thinking specifically like art versus income, music business versus music passion, because I know for me the two mingle often. Having to make those hard decisions where you get a gig that's going to pay a lot of money, but you have to move one of your solo dates or something like that. And there's a lot of that in today's world. And the middle class musician is, or trying to be a middle class musician has been a difficult road as of late. And I'd just love to know your thoughts on what is it like for you personally, because each one of us sort of have a different lane that we work in, being a guitarist, a musician in 2024?
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess I would say that I wouldn't have thought when I started out or when I entered Berklee or when I left and started out that I would have to know so much about all these ancillary things, all these different software, whether it's like recording software or video editing software or Photoshop and all this. I never would have thought that I would have to have that depth of knowledge in that, and I have, which is, I don't know. You rise to the occasion if that's what's required. Like if I need to be good at this to get my stuff out there, then that's what I have to do. And thankfully, I like it. One of the things I immersed myself with in during 2020 was Photoshop, and it's just really paid off. I started off making lessons for my own students and making memes just because I'm a ludicrous person, and it's turned into something meaningful, something that people derive value from, and I derive money from. So, that's like the short of it. But I would also say that where I am now is not really where I wanted to be when I was 22 or where I thought I'd be. And that having been said, as I put that bio together for you, trying to like get that blurb together, I would be like pleasantly surprised and I think fulfilled had I like, had that glimpse into the future. I've done a ton of cool things, whether it's like DJing and playing guitar at Warped Tour, or headlining the Himalayan Blues Festival and recording all this original music, or making memes that are like viral memes that reach millions of people. It's just kind of funny. But I'm trying to like fail forward, which might seem like a bit of a harsh overstatement, but learning all the time and trying to have fun with it. I'm never going to reach the end of it. I have like 10 unwritten unpublished albums worth of material that I just like feel like I'm salivating at the opportunity to like release the next one. But so that's coming. But to your point, or implicit in your point, was like it is the music business. And considering where I am today in my journey, it's very much about the business aspect of it.
Yeah, I think that Chris and probably you, John, are better examples of the sort of diversification that you have to indulge in if you want to actually make your way as a musician right now, unless you're very fortunate and you're able to really make ends meet with your music and your music alone. And I think people, particularly those of us who indulge in creative music, not mainstream music, and I think that definitely covers the three of us in various ways. That is, as I said, unless you're very, very lucky, and also came along at a time when the world was more open to progressive music, whatever shape or form that may take. Say if you're, Steven Wilson or Eric Johnson or Scott Henderson, just to name people that have
Naming
managed
all
to
my
make their
favorites.
way.
Okay, go on.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
all these
Yeah.
musicians who, Pat Metheny, like these guys, if they were coming up now, would probably have a very different road to hoe, and despite their incredible level of musicianship and their original visions. So for me, getting the teaching gig at Berklee was the big shift. I never expected I would teach, and some of my students know this story, and they'd probably roll their eyes if they hear me sing in the interview, but so be it. My guitar teacher at Miami, one day when I came in for the lesson, something prompted him to say, one day you may be sitting on my side of the room and you might be teaching at a college of music somewhere. And I said, no way, man. All I'm ever going to do is play. That's what I do. I'm a player, and that's the end of it. But then the teaching fellowship at North Texas sort of fell in my lap, and then that led to the gig at Berklee, all indirectly, but such as it was, it happened. And while I was in Boston, I started gigging right away, and I was gigging so much as a freelance player that I had gigs almost every day, and also touring with the aforementioned Bruce Katz and a couple of other people as well. And it actually took a couple of years for it to occur to me that I did not need to be doing all of that, that I had original music that I wanted to get out there, and that I was actually doing well enough, just well enough with the Berklee gig for me to be able to put playing gigs that I didn't really want to be playing aside and focus on my own thing, which is what I've done ever since. So I made myself unavailable. I put a post-it note on my phone that said no, actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so if it wasn't teaching at Berklee, let's say that wasn't the option, what would it be?
I probably would have moved to LA or New York. I have a lot of good friends that I went to school with who are doing very, very well as touring sidemen
Mm-hmm.
and session players. So that's probably the world I would have gone into, and not necessarily because I wanted to, but I do. I'm glad I took the path I took, but I think that would have been the alternate path. And
Mm.
in the mid '90s, that was still an available and viable thing to do, though it was already on its way out, I have to say. But I did have very good connections, and these guys are still out doing huge tours. And when they come back, they're doing pretty big sessions. So
Right.
I think that would have been available to me. I can say with a fair amount of confidence. So that's probably where I'd be now.
Wow. That's really okay. Let me ask. I want to ask that at Chris too. Like, if it wasn't Guitarmalade now, what would it be?
Right, yeah, that's a great question. I was on track to release my next album and play out more in 2020, and then I pivoted because I had both things. I had Dropkick Pop, my like DJ guitar thing happening, and a record out, and at that time, and I had Guitarmalade, but Guitarmalade was just like an online brand, and there wasn't really any. Uh, I wasn't really selling anything, you know. So I pivoted really quickly into that. But yeah, to answer your question, I would be playing live DJ guitar sets. You know, I love how that music is. I love how like massive the music sounds. I mean, I love jazz trio and jazz fusion stuff as well, and I did that for a long time. I just it's easier to play solo in a sense, and harder in other ways. But you know, I also looked at the landscape and you know what was happening with the festivals like Burlington Discover Jazz Festival and all these like
Mm-hmm.
jazz festivals and this kind of thing that I was playing versus like what was becoming more and more viable in like 2010, 15, like the whole EDM thing. And it's something I always wanted to do from like high school. Just it's just one of another thing that I keep thinking, why did it take that long to get into that? So I would have gone in that direction. I've always taught like since even probably before I left Berklee. My mother's a teacher, my aunt's a teacher, my grandfather's a teacher. So, you
Mm-hmm.
know, that's just, you are who you are. So, some combination of teaching and doing like guitar centric EDM production and performance is where I'd be. Um, and, you know, I may yet still be there, right? Like, I have all this music, I'm just like itching to get out. So, it will come out. It's just, you know, you can do everything, you just can't do everything at the same time.
Yeah.
And you, John?
I'm sorry?
I
I'm asking John what his diversification, his
well,
views on diversification and making a living are.
I think I'm kind of the poster boy for diversification, sort of out of necessity, and also because I like you, Julian, I had trouble saying no. So so I I've been teaching guitar lessons since I was a sophomore in high school as my main income. So always been doing that since then. So it's been a long time. Also, I play in a wedding and function band, which I've been doing for like the past 8 or 9 years. We do maybe 30 or 40 dates a year. I'm also a musical theater guitar player where I've done some Broadway stuff and then more regional things because it is steady and it pays well and it's a challenge. And I also do recording, of course, for hire. I have a church gig every Sunday. I do that. Mile Marker Zero is my main band, which we're just going to put out a new album. We do festivals and touring when we can get five guys who are adults with kids to to be able to actually line up and do those things. And then I teach at a conservatory 1 day a week. And so like I literally am doing a million things always. And I've sort of always been like that. And part of asking is because I'm trying to figure out you know, I mean, we mentioned this offline, but, you know, I'm about to be a father for the first time. And I know that I'm just not going to be able to say yes to everything. Like, I have so many things and I love doing those, and it keeps me refreshed for other things that I'm doing. And it gets me, you know, I work on my reading when I do the theater stuff. So it's great. So when I'm in another situation, and, you know, whenever I go sit in with my friend's band who hires me, I'm learning, trying to cram a bunch of new songs, and that helps my, you know, it all sort of feeds on each other. But I just know that that's not a thing that's going to be possible, and I'm sure you two can attest to that. Moving forward, like, good luck finding the time. I mean, I barely find the time as it is, and also hang out with my wife and keep up with friends and all those things, you know. So I don't know what else it would be. It would probably be more teaching. I'm like you, Chris. My mom was a teacher for 35 years. My aunt was a teacher. My grandfather was a professor at Duke. So like you said, in the blood, probably more of that. But I just don't know what I would do if it wasn't at least music related. Like, nothing else appealed to me ever, like, to that level, you know?
I agree. I was unable to see any other path forward by the time I was 15 or 16.
And if it's not that, you shouldn't be doing it, I think, because it's just too hard. It's just too time consuming. You don't make enough money. Like, all these, like you could start an entry level job at a crappy sales job and make more money than most of us make in a year, you know, right away. You're at 18 years old or whatever. So it can't be for that. Right?
Absolutely. I tell my students that all the time, particularly if they're slacking, you know. I say, this better be what you love. It has to be beyond what you love. It's not a passing fancy here. So either get on board or make another
Go do
plan.
something else. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I'm hearing some threads here, which is really interesting, is that instruction kind of has to be of some level, is probably there for you, right? I mean, that teaching on some level maybe has to be there.
I think it's there for just about anybody that's in the creative end of music making, particularly even guys like Pat Metheny and John Schofield. These guys are,
Right.
you know, doing clinics and being artists in residence at schools of music, and it's part of what they do. So even at that level, it's part of it. And at the old, you know, tired old saw of those that can't do teach is long dead.
There's another one, which is if you're curious about something, read about it. If you want to get good at it, do it. And if you want to master it, teach it. I forget who said it. It's like an Eastern thing. Um, you know, I'm glad, even if I didn't have to teach at all, I would still teach. It just keeps you sharp. And, you know, all of like the Guitarmalade content is created because it's like solving a problem as expediently as, you know, is reasonable for like some people. And whether my students play jazz or rock or like whatever they're interested in, it's like at that intermediate level, it's a lot of the same questions, you know, about like intervals and diatonic versus non-diatonic harmony, like that point where things get sticky for a lot of people, irrespective of their interest, is a lot of the same stuff. And that's definitely the Guitarmalade niche. um, but so I don't know if you feel that same way, Julian, like you would still teach if you didn't have to teach, or if you didn't have the Berklee gig, but it can be inspiring as well.
Well, the good thing that the Berklee gig brings me is really high level students who sometimes do keep me on my toes. So, you know, they're like wolves, you know, they can smell blood. You cannot make a mistake or show any weakness in front of these kids, you know. Uh, so you have to be on it. You have to be on top of it, and you have to, as it were, establish a certain level of dominance. That kind of sounds weird, but you know, you have to draw their respect in order to get their attention. And I know Chris was my student. Had so many great students over the years, and he's the one that was just like that. You know, challenging and maybe a little bit of a wise ass,
I couldn't
but
tell.
also, can you imagine? But also very, very, very respectful, and really hardworking. So there's, when the students are good, yeah, I would say I would probably have trouble giving up teaching, entirely in any case.
I think I would cut it down. Like if I had,
Yeah.
I think I've been doing it for a long time now, and I think I would take my favorite top 5 students or something, and I'd keep them on, and then
Okay.
the rest could go to someone else in town who's younger and hungrier and wants to shape lives. Um, that's really interesting. And so, well, what's interesting about us three is that we are all, unlike a lot of my friends who I work with in many of these different capacities that I was talking about, we are full-time musicians in the things that we do for income, right? And what's the sort of the thing that has been rattling around my head for the last year is sort of the what is the percentage that you are an artist, so to speak, versus a craftsman? And the way I sort of picture that is, like, for instance, if you said to me, John, you don't need the money, so what are you going to drop? I would probably go, oh, well, the wedding band. As much as I love it and I'm friends with them, and I really enjoy the stuff. It's just a huge time commitment. It's usually a 12 to 15 hour day, including travel. And so I would probably not. That is like 95% for the income, because it's a great paycheck. And I get to play with my friends, which is an awesome bonus. I'm in a lucky situation. I'm not playing with people I don't like, or musicians that are not, because I have friends who do that too. But I think that is sort of the thing that's been on my mind, because now my time is going to be even more compressed. I have a bunch of these projects going on. I have all these different sort of fields within music, which is great, because if in my mind it's always been, if something goes down, I can supplement with some of these other things and I don't have to worry about it. But as time goes on, the pressure of putting more of your time towards the income generating things versus the art that you want to put out. Chris, your solo albums, how many you said you had, over a dozen or whatever, right? Like, you have finite time, finite resources. And so how do you sort of draw that line for yourself? I mean, Julien, you said you kind of said, I'm not taking anybody else's gigs, which is a very big line in the sand to draw. And I'm guessing when you did that was a kind of a scary line to draw, or was it not, because you had the steady teaching gig?
It was a little bit scary. It was, but at the time there were actually enough gigs around regionally, for my own band to work. So I was able to do maybe 2 or 3 gigs a week regionally with my band. So it was not a complete cutoff, just travel up to, New Hampshire, or to Maine, out to New York, down to the city. Um, so I was busy enough with that, but then eventually those things all sort of dried up. And, the financial crisis of 2008 was a big one, actually. I think that actually hit gigs harder than, the COVID thing in many ways. Things are sort of kind of ramping back up to the poor state of affairs that they were in before COVID at this point,
Mm.
right? But that really hit things hard. A lot of venues closed, so the types of places I was playing, um, performance venues that were eclectic, listening rooms, that sort of those sorts of places, started to close. So it wasn't like I guess I'm saying it wasn't really scary right away, but then it became demoralizing, because I sort of woke up and went, "Oh wow, wait, I can't take a tour down the East Coast because half the places I played on my 2007 tour are now gone." and most of those places were the good gigs, not the ones that were there to, keep the band on the road and pay the bills and the gas and the rooms and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's things have definitely changed. And the other thing is when you ramp down from doing sideman gigs and you say no to enough people enough times, eventually people start calling you because they just assume you don't want to do it, or they assume you're doing something else.
Mm-hmm.
So getting yourself out of the game can be very self-defeating, and it can be hard to get back in.
Did you ever think that maybe there was a certain point, maybe it was 2008 or something, where you're like, maybe I should take some other, let me see if maybe take some other work, or maybe I should see if someone else needs a guitar player for, one of your friends who's on the road or something who could still make it happen? Or
I did think about it, but I didn't go through with it. What I actually started doing a bit more of, and I go into times of flux with this, is I started going out and playing more straight ahead jazz trio gigs.
mm-hmm.
um, because those are fairly easy to get. They pay, and I'm unfortunately not talking about playing like Smalls or the Blue Note.
Sure,
I'm
sure.
talking about playing what I would be derisively known as a restaurant jazz, or like jazz brunches, that sort of thing. You're still playing tunes, and you're often playing with really good players, but you're not. It's not. The expectation is not super high
You're
level.
you're playing a lot of Girl from Ipanema on those gigs, and
Well, you're trying to at least feel that vibe, or be cognizant of that in any case. I'm not going to be going to my outermost realm of Coltrane substitutions.
nobody wants to hear that when they're eating a steak.
Right? Yeah. So, yeah. So I did do more of that, and that comes and goes in my menu of things I'm willing or unwilling to do. If it makes me, I have something that is very cynically, I call it the misery index,
Mm.
which is an imaginary graph wherein income and quality of gig are on a
Inversely.
couple of different they're on a couple of different axes, and I examine the situation to see where it falls on that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. That's actually, I know you say that's cynical, but that's actually like a very practical way of doing it. Like, it's almost like, okay, this pays enough for me, even though I'm not going to love it. I like it enough, and it falls in the middle of the graph, right? Okay, I can take that, or I can go for that thing. But if it's tons of work, little payoff, I don't like the music, I'm not doing it, or
Yeah, or the
something like that.
musicians.
Or the musicians, of
Right.
course.
I can remember finishing one gig down on Cape Cod, and I had a long drive home, and the rhythm section was terrible. And I actually said to the band leader, the singer, um, "Look, if you call these guys again,
I don't.
don't call me." And that was the last time I ever worked with that person,
Yeah.
and I was okay with that. I knew I was probably, putting the hatchet to that gig forever, and I was, as it turned out. But it's fine with me. I was so miserable. I was thinking, man, I got a 2-hour drive home, and this is what I have to show for it, $150 in my pocket, and I'm absolutely miserable. So these things inform the misery index.
I like that. This needs, speaking of memes, Chris, you gotta, this'll
I'm
be
on
one
it.
that you
I'm
have
on
to tag Julien in, and
And
it's
no
gonna,
doubt he'll come up with something good for this.
yeah, I love that. So, okay. So you said something, Chris, that is on this sort of path, which is, you said, you can do everything, but you can't do everything all at once, which I love. I've definitely heard that before too. So right now you are in, I have all this material I really want to put out, but I can't do it yet. So all right, well, tell me do you have a calculus where you sort of go, okay, this is for my heart, I need to do this, I can't quite do it yet, but I'm going to do it when? Like, do you have sort of a, a formula for that, or?
I don't know if it's a concrete formula or as succinct as the axis of misery, but yes, and other things come into it that I might not think. For example, I did an album in I really wanted to do this DJ guitar thing back in like 2010. I decided to really get everything going, but only problem, I don't know how to do that. So I did another album with a friend, um, and in doing so, in creating that album and writing that music and working with Logic Pro for a year, I got to that level where I could produce my own stuff. And so it was a means to an end in a sense. I mean, I still liked the music. It was like this IDM drum and bass guitar kind of thing. And then by the time I had done that work, I had like all the skills I needed to produce my own stuff. But in terms of what I'm working on right now, what I want to release next, definitely Guitarmalade is really the focus. I have a few things I'm working on in the way of like more live workshops, more courses that need to come out first, and then numerology, and Eastern numerology next year is my enemy year, so I'm not going to be doing anything that year other than practicing. And I'm going to be getting ready to do this. And yeah, I have some things in mind. One of which is like this sort of ethereal classics album, sort of like delay centric, like the Buckethead Colma album or Bill Frisell, like good chord solos of these classic tunes that I want to do. And I have like the imagery in mind as well. There's probably going to be like a digital art kind of connection there. Fusing those two things are of real interest to me. It is twice as much work. And then there are others too. Like I have jazz trio albums that are like completely written and to some degree recorded already, but I'm probably going to do the classics one first, again, to kind of like warm up for others, and because I think it would do the best. And then, and it will inform my like skill level. Because I mean, you probably feel this too. Like, teaching is one thing, and practicing writing tunes is another, but there's nothing to get like the fire under your ass, like having to play them live in front of people or, actually touring on it. I remember when my first album came out in 2008 and like some of this stuff I could like hardly play because I worked out in the studio. But by a year's time after playing that stuff, I was like on it. I could not hit that wrong, hit some of these like harmonics. I couldn't miss. So, it's I wish I was the highest level of myself at all times. It's just not the way it is. But so I hope I'm answering your question. I will probably do this classics guitar looping delay chord solo thing first before I do other things. And there's a big well to choose from, certainly.
That definitely makes sense. And I think that the fact that you even have sort of a game plan for like, okay, I want to do this one first, and then I have this and like you're kind of like doing it as it comes. I think that's probably better than doing about a billion things at once and then trying to put your energies into all of them. So
also, previously I've done like my favorite track on the album first, but then by the time I learn through the process of doing, it's like, man, I wish I did that last, because like I would have learned so much by the time I got to the end of it, that it would have been elevated and less of like a pain in the ass to record, and some of those problems would have been solved earlier, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's just I'm never gonna get everything out there, which is kind of sad, but that's okay too. As long as you're like realize that, then you aren't like despondent, I guess. But to answer your previous question, I would definitely, even though I make most of my money or teaching, I've worn every hat conceivable, but I make most of my money teaching. I still identify as an artist really before anything else. But it's like, I don't know if you want to call it a downside, but it's like something that happens when you're good at things. You're just like more distractions when you're good at things. And like Julien said, like saying no is hard. Having a family makes it a lot easier to say no to things, though. I'd have to say, like, people invite me in a session, it's like, are you crazy? Like, no, I'm not going there. Like, of course I'm not going there. So that has, amongst other things, informed that decision. I know, John, you're about to be in that camp as well, right?
I am, yeah. Imminent, within a couple weeks. So we will see. It's funny because everyone said to me, you have no idea. Like
Yeah.
your decisions will be made for you. I guess I'm at a fortunate point where I have enough stuff on the horizon where I can kind of sort of balance that all, with exceptions. But like, I kind of, and I've had a lot of people tell me, especially young parents, are like, you won't have a choice. There's going to be things that you're just going to have to hack off, and you know what? Don't worry about it, because it's just going to happen. So I hope that's the case. And I'm also a chronic people pleaser, so I usually say yes, and I want people to be happy if they're going to hire me to do stuff, and I hate saying no. So I'm working on that too, and I think that'll be part of it. So we'll see. And I'm definitely going to be tapping you guys for some advice probably when it comes to fatherhood here. So if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Not at all.
All right, there's a few more things I want to. This has really been very fun so far, and now we get into the real guitar centric, fiery. We're going to start with a fiery, contentious topic, which is one that's probably been talked about to death on guitar forums everywhere. When I see people arguing on the gear page, this is one of them, which is technology and it's more specifically for us guitar players, is modelers versus tube amps. Now, I'll start off with this. I can almost guarantee that I have the most experience with modelers out of all three of us here. I've been using Fractal for about 12 years now, not exclusively in everything I do, but for many, many things. And so I'm slightly biased in terms of that. But I think the real question is, if you are a guitar player who is trying to be a professional, like all three of us, right? What is your experience with having to deal with these things, not having to deal with these things? How satisfied are you if you have to use one? Can you still get your sound and the things that you like out of one if you've had that experience? I know that many of my students who are younger have never played on a real amp before, not once. Many. For probably about 6 or 7 years now, that's been the thing, because it's been enough time where the technology's gotten good enough and cheap enough. Before it used to be really expensive, now it's like relatively affordable. So, I just would like to know your experiences with these things, and then I might throw out some challenges here, respectfully, of course.
Chris, you want to address this first?
Sure. Well, a couple of things. I mean, I've used plugins and this kind of thing to record with when I do, social media video posts, because it's just way more expedient than like miking off an amp.
Yeah.
So that makes more sense. However, I mean, I just love a tube amp, and a really good tube amp, a responsive tube amp inspires my playing to a degree that like digital just will not. Like a lot of the harmonics and the reactive element is just not there in the digital stuff I've played. I've played other people's digital stuff, so it's not exactly comparing apples to apples, but the tone that is inspiring is just a really special thing. I've played Marshall Plexis that are just as good as I would want them to be. I've played like live stereo Bogner setups where it's just like the God tone, and to me, nothing is really compared to that. I think the modeling thing tone-wise for me is good enough with a few specific tone needs. Like the overcompressed jazz thing is fine for me when I'm recording something, or like the gated, super high distortion gated like metal tone, that's like okay, that's fine for me. Or some of the ethereal stuff where it's very plugin heavy, using like Reactor, Molecular, and all these just wild, weird plugins. I'm like, this is just a pad, it's fine. I think an element of the discussion would be like, can you afford it, and like what are your needs? Because if you can't afford a $10,000 Plexi, then I don't, you're not really the person to ask because that colors it a little bit if you can't attain it. If you can and you choose to get something else, kind of a different story. But like the value money thing is kind of an element of that argument. And then there's like the practicality. Like a Marshall half stack weighs a ton, and might not be the same experience at all volume levels. Whereas like quad cortex or something is really easy to dial in, really light, really reliable. So I mean, if you're a professional guitarist who does GB and wedding gigs, like that makes a lot of sense. Whereas if you're a virtuoso guitarist playing and recording live and replaying like fusion stuff, and the tone is of the utmost priority, then that makes sense. But if you're neither one of those people, it's moot anyway. If you can't afford it and you don't have gigs, it's just like stay in the comment section, I guess. I mean, I haven't had the opportunity to buy a Plexi recently, but I think I will take that opportunity in the future. I just got a Wagner Ecstasy, which I always wanted because Steve Vai
Nice.
has one, and it's
Yeah,
a lot
yeah.
of fun to play and crank up. But even that isn't as reactive as like the most. It's like a very compressed sound. It's not as reactive as older Fenders and Marshalls that I've played. But that, again, just to wrap it up, I will probably also be getting a quad cortex because I want to do like live looping stuff, and I want it to be as small an imprint as possible. Like I said earlier, when I started with Dropkick Pop and going solo, I thought I'll have to carry so much less stuff, and it's more stuff to carry. You've got like the pedal board and the cable bag and two guitars and a tube amp, and it's like, oh my god, the car is like full, and I'm going to play a one-man show. It just doesn't make any sense. So I'll probably do that, and for business, selfish reasons too. If I can, like, sell a collection of the patches,
Yeah.
it's just might make sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, both of those things are in my future.
Interesting. Okay, so you're sort of an A B guy, where in A type of things you're probably would never think about using modeling, but for particular projects you're like, I'm going to be all about it. For a lot of it sounds like practical reasons, right? Like if you had a roadie to do all that stuff and set you up, and you didn't have to do it yourself and lug and all that, then it's like, oh, okay, well, I might as well use the best stuff that I want. Okay, all right, Julien, lay us on some guy with a bunch of beautiful Marshalls in the back. Tell me.
I know my point of view is clearly skewed, right? You see what's behind me here. So, and then over there's an AC30.
Oh yeah.
And I have stuff all over the house. But I'm yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm older than you guys. I grew up playing vintage tube amps. My first amp, other than a really crappy tube amp that a friend built for me, my first good amp was a 62 Fender concert amp, a Brown concert amp. So since the beginning, I've always known what it was like to play through a good cranked up tube amp. I know what that feels like. I know what it sounds like. I know what it's like in the studio. I know how to get sounds. I know what it's like in a variety of different sonic environments. Most importantly, I really know what it feels like. I understand the dynamics of it. And to my ears, in the world of modeling, from what the experience I've had, which is certainly not as extensive as either one of you guys, I've not found or felt anything that comes close to those, to my real amps. That being said, of course, if I were doing what you were doing, if I were playing those sorts of gigs, theater, weddings, gigs that were not where it wasn't absolutely fundamental that I'd be getting my sound, I would certainly be investigating modeling. I mean, I have at an undisclosed location a Boss Katana amp.
What? Wow.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Heard it here first, people. You've heard it here first.
Yeah.
I think it's great, and it's I think that's what Berklee should have for their students. They've got a bunch of crappy hot rod deluxes that are breaking all the time by just sitting there,
Right.
So having a good, reliable, decent sounding amp that, granted will be technological toilet paper in 10 years because there'll be something that sounds 100 times better, and that's another subject, another kind of thing along those same lines. But just the same, I think there is a lot of wisdom. I think if you're a kid in your room at home, or you're a hobbyist, and just playing for pleasure, and you want to get the sounds of your heroes, and you want to do it at a volume that they can't hear in the next town, then modeling is great. It's great. It's like, I wish I'd had something like that when I was learning. But I think if you really want to experience the rather organic nature of the electric guitar, because it is really organic feeling to play, and very honest and very different to play, an old Strat through an old Marshall. It's really, really a different thing. And while you might be able to model the end result of somebody's idealized notion of what that sounds like with a, fractal equipment, or a Kemper, or, quad cortex, or whatever, the actual experience is going to be very, very different. And for those that know, such as myself, the sound is going to be different too. Like I can usually tell. And I've heard art, like I saw Dweezil Zappa, for example, playing through an amp rig for an anniversary gig of Live at the Roxy and elsewhere. And he sounded great. And his rig was insanely complex, I have to say. Then I saw him again playing through a Fractal, and granted, the venue was different. So there's that to consider, but it was way different, and it sounded a lot less compelling to me. And so there's that.
Wow, that's I think that's, you guys are both being extremely fair right now, which I'm not used to hearing on these debates in the and conversations on the internet. So I love that. So I'll sort of tell you where I'm coming from, and I'm going to condense it because it's a long, drawn out tale. But I would, hands down, if I had my druthers always, I would be playing a great tube amp with a great speaker cabinet, mic'd up well. So that's out there. However, there's some things that I think have progressed in the past 5 years or so, where these unbelievable players who have hearing like a bat, who just are so intense about their tone, are utilizing these things now that you would never expect. I mean, even you mentioned Scott Henderson before, Julien. He got rid of his speaker cabinets for this last album because he found IRs that it's not technically, I mean, it's partially modeling, right? He still uses his Marshalls, and I think his Sir stuff when he records. Internet, don't kill me for that. But he said, I have these are as good, if not better, than my captures. And this is from someone who is known as just the most picky, like an Eric Johnson level stuff. And he's like, no, it feels great. And that's what I use. And if you listen to his new album, his guitar sounds insane. It sounds amazing. It sounds just like Scott Henderson as far as my ears can pick things up. So, and you hear about all these real tone chasers who are able, and granted, it is a much more difficult thing to do. Then it's much more simple in a way to plug into a great amplifier using a great guitar and a great speaker cabinet, and you're kind of going to get something that sounds awesome if you have those requirements. Almost always, unless the room you're playing in is terrible. That's another story. But I have found that in the recent iteration of these products, it's only going to get more accurate the higher the computing power. I mean, I don't know if there's anything legitimately magical about the fact that there's, tube circuitry and speaker technology. It may just be that we haven't sliced it up enough, computing power wise, to accurately capture as much as possible the what you're hearing. And if you see how computing power is going in all the other areas of life, and now including AI and large language models and all these things, it's pretty wild. And I am assuming that it's only going to get better from this point, where if you're hearing great players, like I mentioned, go, yeah, wow, I really can't tell a difference. and people who are not just schlocks, people who are really intense in their tone. It's like it feels pretty much the same to me, and I can get it consistent night to night and all these things. I think there's always going to be a market for vintage amps and just great amplifiers and sort of traditional ways. I mean, I don't think that's ever going to go away. I would not want it to go away because I think it's special. But I think that the barrier, if it hasn't been erased already, it's going to be soon. So then comes if you take my premise, if you agree with my premise or maybe semi-agree with it, then what that means is that then at that point it's just a choice that's up to you based on price, affordability. I guess that's the same thing, but how about portability? How about even you may even prefer that than going through the rigmarole of miking up a speaker cabinet for your record, which some people are doing now. So that's kind of where I fall on that. I don't know if you have any reactions to that, but.
Well, yeah, all those things track. Well, a couple things. I wish I'd paid more attention to this video I was listening to about this, but something like the resolution, for lack of a better word, in digital cannot go below a certain point, and like vacuum tubes and analog computers actually are at a level that digital will never reach. I think you would have to have like a quantum computer to do something different. Again, I play guitar for a living, whatever. Like I was listening to a thing that basically said analog computers and vacuum tubes are accessing something that is like not accessible to digital, or a parallel that's like equally fringe would be like Formula One, when you're comparing a driver of like, a generational talent versus a whomever. The telemetry is there, you can track what they're doing, but you can't really track it that quickly. Now, does it make a difference? Does it make a difference to you? Does it make a difference in the room? Does it make enough of a difference with the price and everything? I'm not sure, but yeah, I wish I'd paid more close attention to that. But the gist of it was that vacuum tubes and vacuum computing do access something that is like basically a finer resolution than ones and zeros in digital will be able to do currently. But the cost and the portability are like the main things there. You hear my son? My son is having a bad time right now.
No modelers, he says.
He's weighing in on that. He's weighing in. It's funny, this is a bit tangential, but he's like very excited about my playing, and he's like, "Oh my God," he's telling everybody in the house, "Did you see this?" He's like 2 years old.
Awesome.
Did you see him doing that? It's amazing, which is a really...
That's sweet.
Like, my mom's a big fan, and like other people who see me play or guitar nerds are fans, but like to have your son be like really genuinely excited about this thing that you can do that's special is an amazing thing.
Anything to weigh in there, Julien?
Well, yeah, that last point, I would agree. Although my daughter is a little, less wowed by our musical talent. My wife's a professional musician too, but I mean, it's just something that's part of her life. She sort of takes it for granted.
Diminished substitutions again. Come on, Dad.
But yeah, regarding the whole amp thing, I will, versus modelers thing. I don't really think it has to be versus it, but I think the issues I have are uninformed people drawing false equivalencies, and that's the sort of thing you're hearing, you see in, YouTube comments or Instagram comments, which are basically the lowest form of human discourse in any event, so sorry, but it's the level of venom and the vitriol that's out there over this thing is crazy.
Yeah,
because
agreed.
most of the people doing the arguing can't play,
right? Yeah,
right. They can't hear. And, so it's, I'm an okay surfer for New England. I'm a pretty decent surfer for my local break, right? But I'm not a good enough surfer to be picky about, a half or a fraction of a liter of foam in my board. I'm not going to claim that I can feel that, because I'm not a professional level surfer. I'm not John Florence, right? I'm far, far, far from being that. So, I think people need to be aware that there is not a common level of expertise on this stuff. Like, if you have experience with something, then, or somebody has experience with something, leave that sort of commentary to the experts. Um, I think there's a huge amount of room for operator error too. I see this all the
Mm-hmm.
time with my students. I teach a class called Recital Workshop for performance majors, and they have to come in and play several times a semester. And oftentimes, rock-oriented players are coming in with their Helix or their Quad Cortex or their little fractal pedal, and they're plugging it into the front end of a tube amp, and
Right.
they're playing the sound that they're comfortable with in their room, and it sounds like they're under
Sounds
the sea
right. Right.
Yeah.
20,000 leagues,
Yes.
right? And I say, look, you got two choices. You either have to take that thing and turn it into the boat anchor that it sounds like, unplug it and plug into that amp directly, or you need to get in there and learn how to program it.
Right.
So, and you need to turn off the speaker emulation, and you need to, tweak it and get it right. You need to plug it
Yes.
into the power amp in on the Hot Rod Deluxe or whatever it is you need to do, but you need to figure out how to use this thing in a professional environment. Um, and it's really a problem. It's a real problem. And also I feel bad because, yeah, you have students that have never played through a tube amp, and to me, that organic feeling and that the ability to actually really play the guitar where it's an honest, bare,
Mm-hmm.
here it is, guitar and amp, maybe a boost or a fuzz, maybe an echoplex or some kind of delay, right? It's a really different thing. It is a skill, and it takes a high level of technical facility and ownership and your ability to control this instrument at volume that is perhaps becoming a lost art.
That's well said. Well said. Yeah, and just let me echo that it took me a very very long time to learn how to dial in decent sounds and being able to cope with the technology, because it's a lot. It's a
Well,
lot.
the funny thing is I do know, and you would know this way better than I, that on a lot of these devices, you're getting into power tube types
Oh yeah.
and bias and really, really deep stuff, which ironically, most of the people who are playing through know nothing about.
Right.
And it's the guys like me that know about that stuff. It's keeping this stuff maintained with the right tubes in it, properly biased, sounding right, the right speakers, the right cables, all that is huge. And I say it is a gigantic pain in the ass. It's stressful. I had to get new tubes, a quartet for my super lead back there. Impossible to
Right.
find.
Right.
Like vintage good tubes and a full quartet anymore. Impossible. So what do I do? These are ongoing issues. So I get both sides of the problem, but um, I don't want to hear anybody telling me, that things sound and feel exactly like what I know, when they're emulating what it is I actually own and have
Sure.
played through for the
Sure.
last 30, 40 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And oh man, this was the most civil discussion I think I've ever seen, and I hope the internet reacts accordingly. Okay, so we're kind of getting close here to the end. I want to talk two things. We'll talk about upcoming projects and promo and stuff right at the end. But one thing that I thought would be fun to kind of just throw out there, it could be a quick sort of thing. What would you, if you knew what you knew now, what would you have practiced more of when you were learning, when you were up and coming and learning how to play the instrument? Any particular thing? I'll give you mine. Reading. I would have started reading much earlier. Just because my friends who read great, it is no effort. And most of them came from playing another instrument, and they somehow had the good fortune of being able to, let me just figuring out how to map things. And then, I mean, I have a friend who will remain nameless who not only is an amazing reader, but he has the most insane perfect pitch you've ever heard in your life. Like he can literally you smack down the bottom end of a piano and he goes, oh, okay, that's a G, blah blah blah. He's totally right. That's 3 cents sharp. It's freakish, and he's a great reader. So there is literally no situation he ever goes into where he's uncomfortable when it comes to like it's pretty amazing. So I think I definitely would have never gotten there. But for me, if I'd started earlier, I think it would have made most of the things that I'm doing now just probably more comfortable. So that would be mine.
Yeah, I definitely would have started reading or taken it more seriously and had it more of a consistent part of my playing and practicing earlier. I started playing at 9, and I hated reading, but I mean,
of course, most guitarists do.
Then you go to Berklee and you have to do all that anyway. So you spend the first 2 years like getting up to speed
Right.
and spending whatever that is to like get to the place at which you should have arrived, which is hard to hear. So I mean, it's there's something like romantic or poetic about like the alchemical element of like the problem becoming the solution kind of thing. And I just to like put this as succinctly as possible, it's like when I work with students now, it's all of that is filtered through their interest. So for example, if someone is super into Vinnie Moore or something, and all they want to do is play scales really fast up and down. You look at the tune, and you're basically like the 5 W's, right? It's like what key is it in? What's the chord progression? What's the meter? What's the tempo? Is the chord progression diatonic or not diatonic? To Julian's point, like if I like this, what do I have to do to be able to do that? And if I like this passing diminished idea he plays, what do I have to practice in order to navigate in that way, like comfortably? So it's a holistic thing, and that's what I do for myself and for all my students. I think about what is knowing a scale. Like when I remember doing an audition when I was probably like 15 or something for something, and I was like, show me what you know. And I played Ionian and Dorian and then Mixolydian. And it's like, I didn't really know that stuff. I knew a scale pattern. I didn't know like examples of tunes that use them and like what the diatonic chords and harmonic analysis would be. And, I feel like it's not that much of a lift to learn that. And it's certainly not that much of a lift if the teachers are like guiding you in that way. You know what I mean? It's just like, I learned, as I said with Julien on an interview we did recently, I didn't know triads until I went to Berklee, until I like knew I had to know them. And I was just an instant gratification junkie and only wanted to play tunes and that kind of thing. But I feel like if it was presented in the way that I present it to my students, it would not have been a problem at all. Like you can have your veggies and your sweets. You can like learn music fundamentals and play whatever obnoxious guitar music you want to play. It's like these things are not, you don't have to separate them, and just a little bit more effort in that over time would have compounded to being like a complete musician.
Wow, that's awesome. Julien?
Well, I was pretty good with my reading when I was younger. I did study a bit of classical guitar in my early teens, and so I was okay with that. I think I would have, if I learned a little earlier on to really practice what I wanted to sound like, in a sense, to direct my practice towards the purity of my own vision as a musician. I wasted a lot of time working on my chops. Honestly, I spent, a teenage boy, I spent hours and hours after a certain point, once I'd heard Steve Morse and, Aldi Meola and McLaughlin and guys, I spent untold hours, working on my alternate picking and cranking up the metronome and going. And then when I started to learn about jazz and understand harmony more, I realized that I'm confusing myself, but I will say that when I went out and played gigs, and I was gigging a lot of the time, I started to play like what I was practicing, right? So I started to play really scalar lines and really fast. And some people were excited by that, which gave me the false impression that what I was doing was actually
good.
musically viable, right? And that kind of fed the beast until I realized, and I recorded and I heard myself and I went, wait a minute, that's not very interesting. And I'm not moved by that. But yet I hear Jeff Beck playing Goodbye Pork Pie Hat, and it
Hmm.
practically moves me to tears. So what's important here? So I think now and since then, I have practiced playing things that are similar to what I would want to be able to improvise in an ideal world.
Mm. Oh,
So
I love that.
I work on things that are very, very challenging technically and musically, and I hope that eventually I will be able to hear them manifest themselves in a intuitive fashion while I'm actually on a gig or in the studio recording a solo. And they generally eventually do. And that's how you know you're stepping up through your plateaus when that begins to happen.
Oh, I love that's a great answer. And yeah, I think we probably have all had the I'm going out there and I'm showing you what I've practiced, which is almost never music. It's almost never musical, I should say. Like almost never. Very rarely is what you've practiced on when you're trying to get something down on a technical level. Very rarely does that actually work when you actually go to do it, right?
Yeah, well, I think every time you pick up the instrument is an opportunity to play music and to play musically.
Yeah.
If you follow that edict, then it will it will follow through into actual real live performance recording gigs, just to be musical all the time, to be fully vested in that, to play thematically, motivically when you're improvising, to make statements, to play phrases. These are the things that you can. These are the things that are more important to practice than to work on playing your scales and your arpeggios and your patterns and your inside picking and your outside picking and all that stuff is it's fine. It's important, but if that's all you work on, nobody not that I really care, what other people think of me, honestly. I don't care if people like my music, beautiful. I think that's great, and I'm very, very happy about that. But I don't play my music to please people. I play it because I don't I write and I compose and I play for because it's who I am and what I do, and I have to put it out there, and I'm really thrilled if people like it, and even more so if they're actually moved by it. But um, in general, if all you work on is things that are not particularly musical, then that's the way you're going to play, and nobody's going to want to hear that because
I love
there's no feeling or soul in it.
wise words. Guys, this has been really great. Thank you so much for doing this. I think this is gonna be fun. I'm gonna put this in a lot of different places, and I would love to do a round two at some point. I think this would be awesome. Before we go, let's do a quick mention of upcoming projects or whatever promo that you want to have, and then where people can check your stuff out. You want to start, Chris?
Sure. Guitarmalade is doing Guitarmalade Live workshops where I basically take answer questions that you've submitted and we like develop an appropriate warm-up arc for that. Then I'll do like a live workshop demonstrating that stuff. Guitarmalade Cookbook update number 15 is coming. We're working on Guitarmalade's Bag of Tricks, which is modes into music, which is basically the music theory of the modes and then all of the like most requested improv tricks and rhythm guitar tricks, like motifs, ABAC motifs, these different ways of practicing that are going to hopefully filter and come out through like your solos. So you practice it in this way and hope that it comes out that way. So that course is coming up, and then getting ready to record my next original album. If I do a single first, maybe, but that's in the not too distant future. I'm very excited.
Awesome. Where can they find if people are interested? Where can they find that?
Sure, guitarmalade.com, and that would be everywhere you would want to look.
All right, Julian.
Well, right now I'm still in the middle of getting a live recording I did in the spring out. So that still needs to be some of it needs to be mixed, and a little bit of editing needs to be done. So I'm hoping to have that out before the end of the year. Other than that, I'm hoping to have time to do some more writing because I'm thinking about what will come along after that. Few gigs coming up here and there, but Most important thing is the album I released within the last year, which is self-titled, and that can be found at Bandcamp only. And that's
Bandcamp
all.
only. Big
Yeah.
big stand.
Yeah, I'm taking
Good.
a stand on it's not too late. All my other stuff, you can find it on Spotify and wherever. It's all already out there. The cat's out of the bag, and I can't reel it back in. But for at least a while, I'm keeping that on Bandcamp, and that's at Julien JulienKasper at bandcamp.com. So it's yeah, it's the green one with me standing in front of the green door. So. And my other ones are there. At least a couple of them are there too. So support the music and go there to get it.
Beautiful. Okay. Well, my update is my band Mile Marker Zero has a new record coming out called Coming of Age on October 4th. We did the same thing as you, Julien, which is when we had our CD release show this summer, we put it on Bandcamp or buying from our website only until October. So we did a lead time for people who are fans. So anybody can listen to that. You can also get it on our Bandcamp. If you're in Europe, go to justforkicks.de. They are our distributor over there, and you can get it much cheaper than if you want the actual physical album than if you were to have us send it from the US. It's insanely expensive. It's like $20 just for shipping to get to Europe. So that would be a place. You can also check out my side project, Zero Sync. That's XEROSYNC. That's on Bandcamp and also on all the streaming services. And yeah, that's pretty much it for now. So thank you all. This was really great. And I will stop the stream here. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
See you soon.